everyone, I am very excited to be here with you for this group takeover. Thank you to Jelly and the Altenew family for allowing me to borrow this space to share with you another card tutorial. Today I will be using the following: fresh lemon cardstock, maple yellow, morning frost, forest glades, espresso, chocolate, obsidian pigment ink, adhesive, either tape and liquid, the Masonry wall 3D embossing folder, and the recently released beautiful craft flower sunflowers. For the card base, you need the following pieces: a rectangle that measures 4 3/4 by 6 3/4 inches, 2 that measure 3 1/4 by 6 3/4, 4 that measure 3/4 of an inch by 6 3/4 inches, a strip that measures 1 inch by 8.5 inches, a second one that measures 8.5 inches by 2 inches, and out of acetate you need a strip that measures 1 3/4 inches by 6. Please take a screenshot or look on the PDF for the metric equivalencies. To assemble the card, first we are going to score as follows. The back side of the base is going to be scored at 3/4 of an inch and 4 inches. Then we are going to score the strips. Both of them will be scored at the same distances. First one is 1 1/8, 1 7/8, 3 1/8, 5 3/8, 6 5/8. But since my scoreboard is smaller excuse me, than the distance I need, I am going to flip it over and I am going to score 1 1/8 and then 1 7/8. So I am going to score the second strip at the same distances: 1 1/8, 1 7/8, 3 1/8, 5 3/8. Rotate it or flip it, and again 1 1/8 and 1 7/8. Before embossing my pieces, I am going to lightly bend my scoring lines. To add more depth to the embossed panels, I am going to use Obsidian Pigment Ink with my embossing folder. But to keep my design consistent, I have secured both strips with a piece of masking tape before running them through my embossing folder. And I did the same for the 4 side panels. I will apply ink to the side that has the writing on my embossing folder. I am going to use the center section mostly, because my pieces are smaller than the actual size of the embossing folder. I am going to position the right side of my paper against the ink. Off camera, I am going to run it through my die cutting machine. Since my folder is slightly shorter or smaller than my piece, what I'm going to do is I am going to re-ink the bottom section of my folder, and I am going to position this against the edge and run it again through my die cutting machine, being careful not to smear the ink, as you can see here. When using this inking technique, I rather use a shim from the start when running it through the die cutting machine, because since I don't secure it with tape, if I do more than one pass, my embossing folder may move and you get different texture, if you would. So I will repeat the same inking process for both the strips and the side panels. If you don't want to, you can leave the bottom sections of the embossed pieces without inking. I just like to do that to have a more polished look, and in case the recipient is curious and look inside the card, it looks finished. So again, I'm placing my paper carefully, closing the lid without moving it too much, and off camera I will emboss again. Now for the strips, I want to catch the detail, continuous detail in horizontal orientation. So what I'm going to do is I am going to emboss the first 4 sections in one pass, and then I will come and finish the other 3 sections. Okay, with the strips I'm going to use the back side of the embossing for the inking. I am aligning, and then carefully I will emboss and come back. So even though it's the same folder, I will get a different texture. Now I will ink and emboss the other 3 sections. I chose to align the pieces, the strips, to the top section of my embossing folder. So when I try to emboss the second section, I will have a fairly decent alignment. Okay, this might get a little messy. So before moving to assemble these pieces, I will let them dry or heat set them, and I am going to go wash my embossing folder. I went ahead and cleaned my embossing folder. If you've never tried this technique, I want you to know there will be a little bit of leftover ink because of the pigments staining the plastic, but that will not affect the texture at all. Okay, if you are afraid of trying this kind of messy technique, you can always do embossing, clear embossing ink with either clear embossing powder or black powder to add a 2-tone dimension to your embossed images. If you are removing the tape from your embossed pieces and the tape seems to be really stuck to the paper, remember you can soften the adhesive using some heat. For ease of removal of your tape, always peel it on a diagonal. Once I have all my pieces embossed, I went ahead and off camera added double-sided adhesive to the back of the 4 strips, this piece of, and then we're going to assemble. This piece is going to be my center piece, so I am going to align it the best I can and adhere it. Be careful not to cover any of your score lines because that will prevent the card from moving. In here, I am going to attach 2 of these strips to either side, the center piece of the back of the card base. Again, making sure I'm not covering any of the score line. If the embossing folder you are using doesn't shrink the paper as much, you may need to trim a little bit on the edges. So once I adhere the embossed pieces to the back side of the card, I am going to flip it over and I am going to attach both strips, one side of both strips. I added adhesive to the last 2 tabs on each strip. So you should have 4 sections with adhesive, 2 on each end for both strips. And we are going to attach This might be a little tricky from my vantage point because I don't want to get my head on the shot. So before pressing completely, I am making sure my card can fold, and then the other strip will go on the opposite end. Okay. Again. Now we're gonna flip our cardstock over, and we are going to attach our acetate. I applied adhesive to only the ends, and I am going to come in and attach it to the back of the center section of both strips. This acetate is going to support our flowers. And then we are going to attach the other two tabs for each strip to the back of the card. If you feel a little resistance there, you may need to guide the paper so it is easy to fold. So now you should have an asymmetric hexagon shape. To finish the back side, I am going to trim a small sliver from the long edge of each strip, just one side. For the center back panel, you'll want to decide how you want to finish it before attaching anything. You can choose from simply stamping a sentiment directly onto the panel, stenciling an image or a background, create a tag and pocket combo, or adding a top folding note card to keep your message hidden. To adhere the pieces to the back, I'll use the fences of my scoring tool to help me keep everything straight and aligned. Okay, before we start adding dimension to our sunflowers, let me ask you something. Did you know that sunflowers are actually fields of tiny blooms? Well, those outer petals are individual ray florets, and the center of the flowers are made of hundreds of teeny tiny flowers called these florets. I cannot stop marveling at how their inflorescence is another example of how nature is so delicate and complex at the same time. Don't you agree? I just think it is amazing. Well, now, after that little piece of trivia, let's get inking. I am using all the die-cut elements from the layering set, along with a stamped and die-cut sentiment from Garden Gala that I prepared off camera. For both flowers, the first layer of ray florets was die-cut from Maple Yellow, the second layer from Fresh Lemon. The foliage, involucre pieces, and stem are die-cut from Forest Glades Cardstock, the receptacle pieces from Dark Chocolate, and the disc florets from Espresso. I also die-cut an extra disc piece to help me build the foliage arrangement. Now let's bring these pieces to life with ink blending, for which I will be using Pocketful of Sunshine and Green Valley ink families, along with a few different blending brush sizes. Now for the first layer of ray florets, I am starting with Fresh Lemon and a number 10 detail blending brush. Starting at the center of each ray and move outward, I will cover about half the length of each floret. Remember, ink always looks darker when first applied than it does when it dries. So don't be afraid to apply a medium to slightly heavier layer of color. Next, using a number 7 brush, I'm applying Honey Drizzle, starting at the base of each ray and blending upward about a third of the length. I am not completely covering the previous color. I want a soft transition between them. With the residual ink left on my number 10 brush, I am inking a soft letter C shape over the flatter section of the disc floret to create cast shadows. Then I am using the remaining ink left on my number 7 brush to do the same on the smaller disc. Now for the second layer of ray florets, we are going to use citrus burst first, and we are going to cover about 7/8 of the length of each ray, pretty much leaving just a small gap, a narrow gap at the top of each petal. And then with a number 7 brush, I will add fresh lemon to about half the length. Once everything is dry, I will decide if I want to deepen any sections of the petals. Finally, I will apply maple yellow to the bottom third of each ray to intensify that depth near the center of the flowers. You can already see how just a little bit of ink blending makes these die cuts feel more alive. If you haven't tried ink blending on your die cuts before, I really encourage you to give it a try. Using Firefly ink and a number 7 brush, I will add cast shadows to the base of the leaves and around the areas where they tuck under the flower head. Small touches of shadow make such a difference in creating dimension, don't you think? And just like that, our sunflowers start to feel layered, dimensional, and full of life. Next, with grass field and a number 5 brush, I will add color between the vein indentations. I will revisit the value when the ink has dried. For the narrower sections, I will apply the ink using the slanted section of the brush. Now for the stem and the second flower. Now for the stem of the second flower, I am using Shadow Creek for the involucre or bracts. I will cover piece number 3 fully with ink. Then I will apply grass field to the next layer of bracts, covering the entire die cut. I will apply Firefly to the smaller bract section or layer. This is piece number 5. But I won't be adding any additional color to piece number 6 or to the stem. With the residual green ink on my number 5 brush, I will add a narrower C shape to the Espresso color discs as I did before with the yellow color. This will create extra dimension. With my Altenew gold gel pen, I will fill in the indentations for the disc florets on both donut-shaped pieces. With a white gel pen, I will try to mimic the appearance of trichomes, the white fuzz on the stem and bracts. I will do a random mix of short dashes and dots along the stem die cut. Then I will add gold details with the gel pen to the indentations on the involucre piece and to the veins of the leaves. Once the ink has dried, I will check the cast shadows again. In this case, I will add more color as my first application dried lighter than I wanted it to be. Using grass field ink, I will color about 1/3 of the length, starting at the base of each leaf. Then, with Shadow Creek, I will cover almost the entire previous layer of color. I will check again when the ink has dried to see if it is enough coverage before assembling the flowers. Following the assembly guide, I will put the flowers together. Don't you just love the keyhole system? I know I do. It is such a time saver. After assembling the flower, I noticed that the rays needed extra color. So I will apply fresh lemon with a number 5 brush from the base or where the rays meet the receptacle to about 1/3 of the length. And then for added contrast, I will add a touch of maple yellow at the base.
The reason why I only apply the adhesive at the very edge on both short ends of the acetate strip is to allow me to insert the stem of the flower when assembling the card to keep it sandwiched between the cardstock and the acetate. In this example, you can see that I attach my sentiment only to the top section of the cardstock. I didn't apply any adhesive in a way that it will prevent or will go over my folded line, so it's still free to move. As you can see, by mixing and matching textures, you can create completely different looks, as I have done here in these 3 different examples. Okay, friends, I hope you give this idea a try, and if you do, please use the hashtag so you can be entered in the giveaway. Now for the challenge. Please create a display card inspired by this design. Finish the back and show us in the picture how you decided to finish it. Make it fit one of the prompts for the February bingo card and post it using the hashtag uniquely folded with a K. I will be back tomorrow for our live session. I can't wait to see what you will create. Thank you for watching.